This is Caregiver Storyteller, produced by CaringKind, the heart of Alzheimer's caregiving. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Storyteller, a storytelling podcast about Alzheimer's and dementia caregiving. I'm Dr. Ann Kenny, and I'll be interviewing caregivers to get their stories about Alzheimer's and dementia caregiving. Occasionally, I'll also interview authors, advocates, researchers, healthcare professionals, and people with Alzheimer's and dementia to hear their stories too. So are you ready? Here we go. So I want to welcome Francesca Falzarano, PhD. I'll introduce her quickly, and then we'll get to some questions and answers. Dr. Falzarano is an assistant professor of gerontology at the University of Southern California with expertise in dementia, family caregiving, and the use of technology with emphasis on enhancing the mental health and well-being of family caregivers. And interestingly, she comes at this from a developmental psychology standpoint. So I'm excited to hear that part. So welcome. Thank you for joining us on Caregiver Storyteller.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, we always start with your story. How did you come into what you're doing? And tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So my development looked a lot different than most kids at my age when I was growing up. So when I was 14 years old, my mom was diagnosed with dementia, a very, very rare form. And well, we thought it was a rare form, but it was very early on. And I was looking around and no one really knew how to talk to a teenager about dementia. And my childhood effectively stopped because then it became all about the care of my mother. And it was scary. It was, something that I didn't understand what was happening at such an important time in my life for, a teenage girl. And I did not know gerontology existed. And I was pursuing my undergraduate degree, and I took an aging and society course, and I just fell in love with the content. But I also realized that that was a way, I kind of used education as a tool to understand and cope and be able to even talk about my mom's illness. And so I decided to go get my PhD in psychology. And as I'm developing this, program of research, at the same time in parallel, my mom is completely bedbound. She lived like that for 17 years with a feeding tube in. My father then got sick, and I was all of a sudden on the front lines, kind of double duty caregiving for both of them. And my caregiving experience was so influenced by our culture. I'm first generation, and how my parent, religion, how Italian culture kind of looks at who provides care and how we provide care, et cetera. And so I started to develop a research program that bridged psychology, but also geriatrics and palliative medicine, and kind of dug my own little niche of family caregiving research because I just was looking around and I didn't understand why nobody was listening to these people's stories. And I had been in so many situations with my own parents where I very much felt like a statistic or, a case. And I feel like I was screaming into the void for somebody to help me. And it was just so, it made me think about how many other people are in my situation. And I started to build a research program that kind of mirrored not only the family caregiving experience, but how different it looks for everyone.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're all different shapes, sizes, ages, everything. And we all have different needs because of that.
So this is going to be so helpful to our listeners because you've, you've just nailed one of those. There is no one shape or size, and you started so young. And I think a lot of people start younger than they imagine. They think, I'm just a daughter. But like you said, your caregiving started the day your mom was diagnosed, or probably even before.
Exactly. And it was never, I never identified as a caregiver, despite the fact that this is my, what my work is about. It was, I'm a daughter.
Mhm.
Um, the
And I
things that,
have these problems. How
yeah,
do I find solutions?
and yeah, if my mom needs help grocery shopping, I was the one to help her or help administer medications and doing things. I was exposed to so much. And I didn't realize that it was caregiving.
Right.
And now I'm uncovering kind of there's just so many other kids who are like me who have a parent with young onset dementia or caregivers who might live across the country, as we kind of talked about before we hit record. It's the world is changing, our population is changing, everything looks so different.
Yeah.
And because there are so many different experiences and different impacts of caregiving, a one size fits all approach is never going to work.
Right. Right. So would you, the piece, the cultural piece is fascinating.
Mm.
Um, and, but as we talked about before we kind of got started, this distance caregiving is something that not that many people talk about. And I've read your papers and they're fascinating. But I also know that distance caregivers are probably not going to read research papers. Could you could you summarize a little bit of what you found about what's so different about a distance caregiver and what might help them, and kind of some tips and tricks for
Absolutely.
those caregivers?
Absolutely. And these are great questions. And if we think about it, just how context has changed, I mean, since COVID, we're working from home. We are more flexible than ever before. We're having fewer kids. And families are more likely to be geographically dispersed than ever before. And a lot of people end up coordinating and managing care from a significant distance away. We've found with long distance caregivers that they often almost don't feel deserving of using the term caregiver because they're not physically there. But they're the ones really doing all the legwork. And then you have the added stress of doing it from a significant distance away. Some people they're taking care of family members who live across the country. Other people are in across the world. And so if there's an emergency and they need to get there, that's a whole different level of stress and responsibility.
Right.
But their challenges are so distinct from a caregiver who might live with the person with dementia. Not saying one is more stressful
No,
than the
absolutely
other.
not. I mean, they're
It's
both
so different.
right.
The challenges of, being visible during healthcare encounters and being able to converse with the healthcare team and kind of be integrated in the healthcare team as we try to do with family-centered care. The cost of financial toll, the emotional toll of travel, being able to manage the care, being able to kind of facilitate and make sure that the caregivers that are on the ground locally are doing everything they need to do. So, and largely they feel that they are excluded from the most important conversations that are happening with the care recipients, doctors. And so technology, though, is completely changing the landscape where it's allowing long distance caregivers to be present, to be visible, and to just have more of an understanding of what's happening in the care recipient's home, and they can, get better support.
So my mom lived with dementia, and for the first several years of I was a distance caregiver as well, and I wasn't really allowed in the doctor's visits. But would you say since COVID now with technology, you're allowed?
I we're
I used to
moving.
have to fly back to come to a
I think, yeah, and I think we're moving toward more options for telehealth. I think there's a lot of technologies, especially being tested with AI, being able to record conversations with an individual's doctor and summarize it into very digestible pieces of information. But it's not happening across the board.
okay.
And it's usually like, I think we're still at a point where a lot of the onus and responsibility falls on the family member, falls on whoever's attending that appointment to get out their phone, FaceTime, make sure everybody's on the call. That's what I had to do with, my family members. But
Okay.
I think
So this
at
onus
least
is still
telehealth is becoming more
okay, good.
integrated into
Yeah.
care.
And I love that idea that AI may help be able to summarize because the report, from a person with cognitive changes, not only the cognitive changes, but I don't really like the message I'm hearing. And so I'm definitely not going to report it back to my daughter, who then will ask me to implement those changes.
Exactly. And in my work of the long distance caregivers, most frequently cited challenge is that there's like inadequate communication.
Okay.
And we can't put the onus on the person with cognitive impairment to
Right.
be the liaison between the family and formal care, the care teams.
Right.
So we're testing different ways that we can make the caregiving experience a little bit more manageable. And there's also a lot of guilt associated with being a distance caregiver, or managing your care responsibilities with your job or or other family responsibilities. The list goes on and on. That's why we all kind of look so different.
Right. Okay. So what are some of I mean, to talk to, so if communication is one of our biggest issues, do you recommend people get access to the medical portal? What do you, from the things that you looked at?
Screaming from the rooftops. And yes, yes. Most people, and I probably shouldn't admit this, but when I was going through this with my parents, I was posing as one of my parents to get access to the portal and reading the notes. And, I wasn't even aware that you can be granted proxy credentials to access the patient portal. I think that is huge because then you can talk to the doctor directly. You can see everything in one place. So I think like that is an easy, very tangible, doable step to get credentials.
Perfect. And as a physician, I can say that when people would bring me notes beforehand that I could read about the difficulties that might be popping up at home, then I could get them into the conversation in a gentle way without alienating the family member. And so I think that portal idea is wonderful because they'd have to slip me a note, like
Exactly.
a physical note while, before I walked in the room and I'd have to read it. But
Right away. Yeah.
to be prepared would have been
It's such a great point too on the physician side. I mean, you can only see what you see during your healthcare appointment, but you're not necessarily sure about what's happening every day at home. And if there's a way for the caregiver to, hey, here's what's been happening with my loved one, I think it gives a more holistic view for everybody.
right.
And a more holistic understanding is better support for both of them.
Exactly. It's a family condition.
The family disease.
And if you don't take in all factors, then things won't be as successful. I mean, I
Yeah.
know some of your research is about what helps the caregiver. Like what does make being a distance caregiver feel more successful besides better communication?
Support, and it's got to be personalized support. A lot of people like to have somebody that they have a shared experience with, that they can open up with. And for a long time there were no resources for long distance caregivers because I don't think they were really categorized as caregivers, as I mentioned before. But there are a lot of great psychosocial behavioral interventions where we teach things like problem solving techniques or challenge management plans, trying to prepare in advance for various scenarios and how one would kind of navigate it. And being able to get support from others who understand what the experience is like. So
Okay.
many of us are doing this behind closed doors. I think there's still a lot of stigma behind dementia, period. And we need to be talking about it because there's so many going through the same thing.
And where would you recommend someone look for something like that with the psychosocial support?
Oh, the internet. The internet is like the
Okay.
most we are currently testing an intervention, though. It's NIA funded, called LD Care. It's a 7-session intervention that we are currently looking at in a randomized controlled trial. And we want to start to disseminate these resources to everybody and make them publicly available, but we also want to establish that there's an efficacious evidence base as well.
Okay. And I know that CaringKind has a program called Partnering Together, which is a psychoeducational support. They have Journey Together, Partnering Together. And one
Partnering Together is such a fabulous program, by the way.
Which is one of for caregivers. And there's also a similar psychoeducational program for people living with dementia so that they have the support they need and almost learn how to speak with the caregiver as well.
Exactly. And Partnering Together is such a great example of the need for a holistic view on dementia. And it's not just the behavioral and psychological symptoms or, the actual physical care tasks. There's grief, there's advanced care planning, there's, navigating these stressful situations in the moment. How do you respond? And it's giving them skills that they need and kind of holding it's having somebody hold your hand
at the beginning, right? And then you have and then you
maintenance and all
move
of that.
into that support, which is like you said, you want to have that shared experience with somebody.
Yeah, and way too many of our caregivers use the term the phrase diagnose and adios.
Yeah.
And the most attention they get is up to the point of diagnosis. And then they feel like, where do I go now? What do I do? So having kind of somebody in the beginning or as resource in the beginning help walk through the process of what to expect. And I think it's so pivotal.
Right. So we'll put, are you still recruiting in your study or?
Yes. Yes, I am.
So would you like us to put that in the show notes? So if people hear this and are interested.
Oh, I would love that. That would be fantastic. We have a few studies going on.
Okay.
And I can quickly summarize another one, but it is called the Living Memory Home for Dementia Care Pairs. And it's basically an online reminiscence therapy platform. But rather than we traditionally use reminiscence therapy more in long-term care settings, we are using this as kind of a dyadic activity for the caregiver and the person with dementia to engage in a shared activity, shared dialogue, and to basically recall meaningful memories and documenting them and photos and music and helping the two be engaged, because it's so important that we remember there's a human and there's a person beyond the illness, and we are so disability focused or deficit focused. We kind of want to, allow the two to bond over memories and things that, are not necessarily dementia related.
Right. And the person who is care partnering also is human and sometimes get lost in the tasks.
Absolutely.
And you forget to stop and enjoy the experience. I mean, as a caregiver, there were so many days that I thought, this is the most amazing thing I've ever done. There were plenty of days where I thought, I am not having a good time. And I know that was the thing about caregiving. It was both the best and worst of times.
The best and worst, yeah. And it's
but to remember the best helped so much. On a bad day, I'd be like, oh. But we sat in that chair and watched that robin build a nest in a bush right outside the window. And in my life at the time, I was a busy doctor. I had 3 kids. I wasn't stopping to watch a robin build a nest, except when I was with my mom. Right. And it was pretty awesome.
And those are the moments that make it just a little easier to get through the hard ones.
Exactly. So both the person living with dementia and the caregiver who seems lost at times as well.
Yeah, lost and just kind of stuck in the present.
Right. Or all the past, in the past
too. Yeah. So, and grief is such a big aspect of dementia that not enough people talk about. All of the losses, and it's very important to kind of establish some ways that we can build resiliency, and also continuity in the relationship that exists. It's going to change,
Right.
but how can we help adapt?
And still make it so meaningful. Like I feel like I went from connecting with my mom, brain to brain, to heart. And I'm so happy I had that change. Um, but it was an adjustment. It was a huge adjustment. And
Yep.
I think having others, for me, it helped because I was a dementia physician, that I had it modeled by other family members that I met in my job, but not everybody has that. And that's why they need the support that you're talking about.
Exactly. I feel lucky that I was in a geriatrics and palliative medicine division. So I was able to kind of watch, observe, and I started adapting some of the language and dropping these medical terms just kind of so people can pay attention to me and pay attention to my parents. And I was cosplaying essentially as a real doctor to get support from the healthcare system. And there's so many people who don't have that. And I still struggled with,
Yes,
navigating that.
I still struggled. I mean, I don't think you can not struggle, but
Exactly.
when you can see these threads, these lifeline threads, which is what we hope this podcast does, is allow people some of these stories to get incorporated into their own lives so they can have a way to
I think, yeah, and
help.
share your story. I think that is probably one of the most empowering, for me, it was one of the most empowering healing parts of the process. And it took me a very long time. And I'm still going through the grieving process. But it's sharing your story is such a powerful tool for change. It inspires one other person to share their story, and stories are what's going to drive change.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, this has been amazing. Do you have any last minute bits of advice? Any really your goldest of nuggets that you would want to pass on?
I think give yourself grace. You are doing an amazing job. And I think it's important that we consciously tell ourselves that every single day because it's difficult work. But also don't be afraid or unwilling to ask for help. It takes a village. And there's so many options for support. And I think it's just so important to be proactive about whatever it is that you need, and being able to name it is hard sometimes. So taking time and being able to spell out, this is what I need, this is what might make something a little bit easier for me, I think goes a very long way.
Okay. And so when somebody spells that out, when somebody kind of sits for a moment over their cup of tea or their cup of coffee or whatever and says, this would make my life easier. But they've also heard diagnose and adios. You say go to the internet. Do you?
It's right now, it is the only thing I think that
Okay.
we have that kind of fills that the gaps between
Okay.
the health and long-term care systems. Now the internet has its own issues.
Sure. So
Um,
how would you tell somebody to avoid some of the scary parts and stick with something tried and true? Should it
there
be?
are so many support communities,
Okay.
like going through CaringKind's website, or CaringKind has virtual programs also. So for individuals who can't attend in person,
Right.
um, all of these organizations are doing such incredible work, but we've seen a real shift in, hey, caregivers are not getting support they need, so they're going to social media and they're following these big figures that we call them carefluencers now, who were posting their day to day with their loved one on what the dementia caregiving looked like. And so, because there's such a gap for support, people are going to the internet to get not only education, but to also relate to each other,
Okay.
whether it's on Reddit or social media. I think we have a long ways to go. I think that technology could be in the future one of the most powerful ways we can get around more personalized support. for caregivers,
Mhm.
because one size fits all is never going to happen. We have Netflix, we have Amazon. We need something like that to be
Yeah.
able to, tell us what we need and where to get some help.
Mhm.
But there's a whole community of support, and it's actually beautiful that you're able to have connections with people that you normally wouldn't
Okay.
have otherwise.
All right. So more coming from you about technology. Also
Mhm.
studies on that. Is that true?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. So you will give me references. We can put them in the show notes so people who have heard this and want to connect with you more about whether they might fit with some of your research.
Absolutely.
I'll
And
have
they
them
can
come to you.
check out our website, ffcaregivinglab.com.
Okay.
And you can email me anytime. I'm always happy to chat and answer questions. And yeah.
Oh, this is great. Thank you so much, Dr. Falzarano.
Thank you, Dr. Kenny. It's such a pleasure and honor to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to your work in the future. This is amazing.
Thank you so much again.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to share your story, go to caringkindnyc.org/podcast. Maybe we'll use your story on the show. We'd love to hear from you. Please subscribe to this podcast and leave some glowing feedback. We love positive reinforcement. I'm Dr. Ann Kenny, and you're listening to Caregiver Storyteller, produced by CaringKind,